Welcome to the GRadulting Workshop Series. My name is Debbie McCuskey, and I'm the Coordinator of Services and Programs for Graduate Student Legal Aid. Our focus today is on police encounters. Hopefully this is not in your future, but you do want to be prepared. It's just part of life, right? So before we start the presentation, I want to tell you about legal aid in case we didn't get to meet you at orientation. There are actually two legal aid offices on campus, one for undergrads and another for grad students. We work together closely and support each other in how we support students. So what does legal aid do? Well, in addition to workshops like this, we provide support to students in four other areas. Number one, legal consultations for local issues. Two, legal consultations for immigration issues. Three, advocacy for students who are facing university charges and are involved in Title IX cases. And four, notary services. So if you paid your student fee, and I know that you did because you're sitting here right now, then there is no additional charge. You've already paid for our services. So get your money's worth and reach out when you need help. So I encourage you to visit our website to learn more about how we help students and to request an appointment. So just a few rules of engagement for the workshop today. This session is being recorded, and I will share that recording along with the slides and some other resources tomorrow. I ask you to please use the Q&A feature rather than the chat to post your questions. The speaker will answer some questions during the presentation and others after the presentation. So don't be shy about asking questions. So let's move on. I want to introduce our speakers. I am pleased to introduce my boss and the director of the other office. So I've today have William Zach Mundy. Zach is the director of Graduate Student Legal Aid. And I've also got Syndy Shilling. She is the director for the Undergrad Student Legal Aid Office. So welcome, Zach and Syndy. I'm so glad you made time for us today.
Thank you so much, Debbie. Could you give me permission to share before we begin?
Of course.
Thank you.
Where are you, Zach? Just a second. You know, just when I think I know Zoom, they change it. So just a minute. All right, Zach, you are a co-host.
Got it. Thank you. All right. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see that. Can everybody see that? Thumbs up. Awesome.
Yeah, it looks great.
So as Debbie said, I'm Zach. I'm the director of Graduate Legal Aid here at Maryland. Syndy is also with us, who's the director of the Student Legal Aid, which serves undergraduate students. And so we're going to run through information about police encounters, sort of what you should do based on a number of scenarios. And then we'll answer any questions that people have about the many situations. And so we kind of, as lawyers, always have to have disclaimers. And so to just tell you that this isn't legal advice, this is sort of general guidance. If you have any sort of questions or concerns, you should, if you're a student, talk to one of us. If you're someone else who found this video, look for a legal aid organization in your area or a private attorney. Because especially when it comes to police encounters, there are many different laws that are coming into play, both federally and locally, from the state level, from the county level, from the city level. And depending on your situation, there may be different advice. You know, there are certainly different consequences if you are getting pulled over for going 5 miles over the speed limit versus getting pulled over because they think you are trafficking drugs. And so that's why this isn't legal advice. That's why we sort of have this disclaimers. For the most part, as you can see, as you would guess, because we are here in the state of Maryland, most of our advice here is geared towards Maryland. But there are many different laws that may come into play. So we will talk about a few of them. We're gonna have a little bit of overview, and then we're gonna talk about the different situations when you may interact with police, whether that's through the common situations that we see in our office, which is traffic stops. Occasionally, you may be stopped on the street. Police may show up at your home. You may actually get arrested and be detained. A lot of our students are also active and may attend protests. And then something that has become an issue over the past year or so is when federal agents appear on campus. And so we're going to give general guidance on these different scenarios. First, sort of tips that go across the board is just it's difficult to interact with police. It is a stressful, frustrating situation, but you will get the best possible outcome if you can be polite in the moment and not panic, and make sure that you are not resisting the police officer. Even if they are violating your rights, resisting never leads to positive outcomes. So I guess I should also preface, we're using in general terms, we're using police to mean all law enforcement, because this was originally geared towards local law enforcement, police officers, state troopers, whether they're county police officers or state troopers. But obviously, there are a lot more interactions with federal agents than there used to be. And so the terminology, we're kind of just using it across the board to apply to all situations. So remain calm as much as you can. And as I said, even if they're violating your rights, you should try to remain calm and know that this isn't the time to fight it. The time to fight it is later on through the complaint process or through a lawsuit. In sort of across the board, you always have these constitutional protections to remain silent, which means to refuse to answer any questions for police, as well as to be provided an attorney and speak with an attorney. If you can afford one, depending on the qualifications, your eligibility, you may have to hire one yourself. But if you cannot afford an attorney, one will be provided to you. If you are one of our F1J1 students or scholars at the university, you still have these rights no matter what. Your rights do not change under the Constitution, though there are some situations there where your rights are a little bit different, where you might have to produce documentation of your status in the U.S. that a domestic student or U.S. citizen might not have to. But in general, when you're interacting with police, you still do have the right to remain silent and the right to speak to an attorney. In the same vein as not resisting, as I'm sure many of you know, police usually do not respond well if you try to challenge them in the moment when they are discussing either a traffic stop, or they're stopping you on the street, or they're trying to execute a warrant. And so we always recommend that you should voice your dissent. Always say that you're not consenting to whatever is taking place, but do that with your voice. Do not do that physically. Do not push back against the officers, because they will harm you, and that might actually give them, if the underlying charges or the underlying interaction is not valid, if you then resist arrest, that resisting can then become a valid charge where you have harmed or assaulted a police officer. So do everything you can in your power to not do that. Make sure that you are documenting as much as possible through your own recollection of what happened after you have a moment to write things down, trying to get the officer's badge number or a license plate for the vehicle for the police. That's one of the issues with ICE nowadays, is trying to track them and knowing who's doing these interactions. Trying to figure out if there are any cameras nearby. That could be you recording with a cell phone, or a bystander, or a local business. And then documenting after the fact as well, that if there are injuries that were sustained, then you want to document that. So don't challenge them in the moment physically, but you can certainly use your voice to voice your dissent. One thing that our international students often don't know, that maybe our domestic students understand, is that the police do not legally have to tell you the truth. And so when you are being interrogated or questioned, they can lie to you, and they will lie to you to try to get you to confess to things. So don't believe them, and document everything depending on what stage in the encounter you're doing. that's kind of our overview for things that are applying to every situation. And now we're going to talk about some of the common situations where you may meet the police IRL in real life. Number one is traffic stops. That is a very common issue for many of our students. What do you have to do when you are pulled over? Well, one, you kind of have to stop the vehicle and pull over. You are required to provide a driver's license, a copy of your registration, as well as proof of insurance when the officer requests it. When it comes to things beyond that, most interactions with police on a traffic stop are probably going to end there. They're going to ask you a couple questions like, do you know how fast you were going, or where are you going, or something along those lines. You're under no obligation to answer those, so you can remain silent, but you do have to provide the documentation to show that you are legally driving the vehicle, and that the vehicle is properly registered and insured. But after that, maybe they just write you a ticket, maybe you're on your way, maybe you're lucky and they gave you a warning. But other than that, if it's going to escalate, you might have questions about when the police can actually do further action. And the number one question is, can they search your car? If they have probable cause to believe that your car contains evidence of a crime, then yes, they can search it. The most common situation for that is what's called plain view, meaning that they see something in your car that is drug paraphernalia or something along those lines, so that they can then search your vehicle. In the state of Maryland, so again, as we gave the preface earlier on, laws are different by state. And so things can change, but in Maryland, the odor of marijuana is not enough for them to then search the vehicle. But what's important for you is to say, no, I do not consent to my vehicle, because even if there's no probable cause, there's no reason for them to believe that there could be evidence of a crime in your vehicle. If they just say, hey, can I look around in here? And they might not even use like formal terms. They might be very informal and say, can I look in your trunk? Can I see what's under, see what's under that blanket in the back seat or something? If you say yes, then they can. And so if you provide consent for them to look in your vehicle, they can do it without a warrant. And so we always want you to say, no, I do not consent to you searching my vehicle. If they search anyway, make sure that you are still saying, I do not consent to the search, because that'll give you grounds, it'll give you stronger grounds later on to try to contest that search in court, and hopefully prevent them from using that evidence against you. What should I do? Just some general tips for traffic stops. Stop it in a safe place as quickly as possible. Make sure that you turn the vehicle off, that you're turning off any music. If it's nighttime, turn on the internal light. Open the window part way and place your hands in a place where they can see them. Again, we don't want to give the police any reason to act irrationally, or escalate the situation. So we're trying to proactively follow their what we think their requests are going to be. As I mentioned, providing the license, registration, and proof of insurance. Similar recommendations for passengers is just stay still, no sudden movements, put your hands where the officer can see them. And then you're going to have to sort of comply with their requests for safety. Passengers always have the right, drivers and passengers always have the right to remain silent. If you're a passenger, this probably depends on where you are. If you're getting pulled over on the highway, it might not apply to you because they might not let you walk on the highway. But if you're in town or on campus or something like that, if the driver is suspected of a crime and the driver is possibly being detained or arrested, you as the passenger can ask, am I free to go? Am I also being detained? And if they say yes, that you are free to go, then you can leave. You are not required to be to remain in that situation. Hopefully you're not in, hopefully that doesn't occur, that it escalates into something more serious where the driver is possibly detained. But that's always something that you can ask, am I free to go? Under Maryland law, if the officer asks you to exit the vehicle, you have to exit the vehicle, which then, sorry. So that's just something to be aware of. Can you record a traffic stop? Yes. In general, you can record the actions of police under the First Amendment, that you are allowed to record them in public spaces. If you are the sort of suspect here, so to speak, like if you're the driver or even if you're a passenger, the officer can tell you to put the phone down if they think that, they're gonna say what they say and say they think that you're holding a weapon or something along those lines, or they want you to sit still. So they can tell you to put it down in that moment if you are the person that is sort of in suspicion. But if you are not, if you're a bystander on the street and you're not involved and you just see the situation and you're recording it, um, then they can't tell you to put it down as long as you're not in the moment or you're not in the situation and you're not part of the investigation. So we recommend sort of putting it in a cup holder or putting it on the dashboard so that you can keep your hands visible, so that you can comply with the request of the officer, but that so you can still record it. And again, as I mentioned, like if you're being suspected of speeding 5 miles over the speed limit and you're facing a very minor fine, the consequences of not recording are going to be much, much less than if they think that you are, as I said, drug trafficking, or that they think that you had a hit and run or a DUI or something along those lines, where it's a much more serious violation. So making sure that you are documenting the situation is more important. What not to do in this situation: don't get out of the vehicle preemptively until you are asked to do so. Make sure that you're not sort of rummaging around suspiciously looking for that license and registration. Sometimes if you are doing so before the police get there, they will try to use that as that basis to search the vehicle because they think that you are hiding something. It should go without saying that you don't want to antagonize or disrespect the officer in the moment, but it is very hard to control our emotions if we feel that we are being wrongly accused and we know that the police are violating our rights. But try as best you can to stay calm in that moment. Never, ever, ever give the police fake documents or identification. Hopefully you don't have them, but if you do, do not provide them to the police. If you were provided a ticket, you have to sign it. The signing is not an acknowledgement of guilt. It is an acknowledgement that they handed you the ticket, and that's it. And so you still have the right to contest it, but you do have to sign it under the law. So make sure you do sign the ticket when they provide it to you. Another one that ideally would go without saying, but it needs to be said: don't attempt to bribe the police, because that's another charge that they will put on top of it, of whatever they're already charging you with. All right, so that's a little bit of an overview on the traffic when you're getting pulled over. And now if we're stopped on the street, again, a lot of the tips are going to be the same. You're going to hear a lot of things over and over, like you can be quiet. You don't have to answer their questions. Ask, am I free to go? When you're stopped on the street, the common situations may be some sort of crime occurred nearby, and you're just being stopped as a witness because the police officers are trying to ask, did anybody see what happened? Did you see the accident that took place? Did you see the burglar run out of the bank? Things like that. Again, if that's the situation, the consequences are probably very low for you and you're not being detained. And so you can determine what's going on by asking, am I free to go? If they say, yes, we're just asking and investigating this crime, you can then choose to leave. You don't have to answer any questions. You can leave the situation. If they say, yes, you are being detained, then you do not, that means you're probably suspected of committing a crime. In that situation, we recommend that you are silent. You have a right to remain silent, that you say, I want to remain silent. You can never be arrested or detained simply for refusing to answer questions, but you can if they believe you committed a crime. And so there's sort of two situations here: whether you think you're a witness to a crime or you're actually a suspect. If you're the witness, you may be getting a subpoena later on anyway to come testify into court to what you saw, but there's not any consequences for just telling the police what you saw. But if you're in any way sort of unsure, ask, am I free to go? Or just refuse to answer the questions. You have no obligation to answer any of the questions. So the safer way to do it is to refuse. In general, in Maryland, you don't have to produce ID to the police. When you're driving, you do, because that's part of proving that you're legally allowed to drive. If they just stop you on the street, you usually don't have to provide ID if they're not arresting you, meaning you're not being detained, unless you're in Montgomery County. Montgomery County has a law that says that you do have to provide identification, or you have to truthfully identify yourself. So again, don't lie to police. Don't give them a fake name. That a lot of times happens sometimes with our underage students who maybe are suspected of drinking, and they think, oh, I just gave a fake ID to somebody else. I told them my name was this. If I don't keep up this story, then I'm going to be found out. But lying to the police is going to be worse. So we don't recommend that. It's also important to know that this is an issue that varies wildly by state. There are, it's about 20 different states that do have different laws that do require you to identify yourself or to provide identification based on certain interactions. And so if you're leaving the state of Maryland and you have questions about that, you should look it up and make sure that you aren't going to get yourself into trouble. What is required to search you if you are just on the street? If they just approach you, they may search you under certain circumstances. So the short answer is maybe they can search you. If they have probable cause, which is a legal term that means that they have sort of reasonable grounds to believe that a crime has been or is being committed, that is sort of number one. Number two, if you are arrested, really under any circumstance, if you're arrested, officers can search your person and immediate surroundings without a warrant. And part of that is for safety, so that, you know, they always say that they ask you if you have any weapons or needles in your pocket so that they don't get stuck by those things. But it's also can be used against you as long as it was a valid arrest. That evidence can be used against you in court. But I guess the third issue, the third one that's not listed here because it's not very common, is if they stop you on the street and they actually have a warrant to search you, they can also search you for that. But usually if they have a warrant to search you, it's an arrest warrant. It's just they're going to arrest you anyway. It's kind of rare that you get a warrant just to search a person themselves. So what should you do in that situation? Always say, I do not consent to the search. Even if they're going to search you anyway, it is important to say you do not consent to the search. As I said earlier with the traffic stops, if you do provide consent, even if they don't have that reasonable basis, that probable cause, they can search you. If they walk up to you and say, hey, you know, can I look in your book bag? If you say yes, then they can look in your book bag. And that's not what we want. That's going to lead to trouble. So what should you do in the moment? You should say, no, I do not consent to the search. And then you should document as much as possible, sort of every interaction. Again, this is sort of the overview tips that you want to get the officer's name and badge number. You want to try to shortly thereafter write down the interaction as you remember it. And if you are able to record, you should record or ask a bystander to do so and try to get their contact information so that they can provide that recording to you. What not to do. Don't run from the police. That can also lead to problems. Not only could it lead to additional charges, but as many of you probably have seen in the news in the past, well, the entire history of America, the police tend to act out and act violently sometimes when people don't comply with their orders. So we don't want to give them that opportunity to do that. Similarly to the traffic stops, never provide fake documents or IDs to the police. If you're receiving a citation, like maybe you're just receiving a ticket for jaywalking or something simple like that, if you receive that citation, you do have to sign for it again. It's not an admission of guilt. It's just acknowledging that they handed you the receipt. In a similar vein as before, we don't want to try to bribe the police. We also don't want to try to escalate the situation by antagonizing or attempting to argue with them. They will escalate the situation enough on their side of the interaction. So we always want to do our best to remain calm and de-escalate if possible. At your home, if the police show up at your home, there's kind of two situations. One is they're just showing up to try to find you. Maybe you're suspected of a crime, but they don't have a warrant yet. Maybe they have an arrest warrant. Maybe they have a warrant to search your home. If they come to your home, you do not have to let them in. Again, if you do let them in, then they don't have to have a warrant and you have consented, and whatever they find, they can use against you. So the best things that you can do is to not open the door and say, I cannot let you in without a warrant. If they say they have a warrant, ask for proof. You can ask them to slide it under the door if you have that You can ask them to hold it up to the window or the peephole so that you can view it and confirm that the information on it is correct, whether it's for a person, whether it's the address, to make sure that they have the right address, because that you'd think that that would be the easy part of it, but there are often mistakes that they show up at the wrong house and they try to force their way in, or there's a typo on there, which means that they cannot then execute the warrant and come into the property. So you always want to verify that ahead of time, to make sure that the warrant is valid. There is a lot of, you know, it's more in the forefront now that there are not just sort of our local warrants from our local Maryland state courts, but there are also warrants from federal agents that we were thinking about, ICE, that are coming to execute these warrants. There are two different types of federal warrants when it comes to that, and really one of them is not a warrant. One of them is just ICE calls it a warrant, but it is an internally issued memorandum that says we need to detain this individual. That does not actually allow them to search the property unless you give them consent. And so this presentation is not geared specifically towards that, but look up online. There are tons of great resources out there. One of the local organizations, well, they're more nationwide now, it's called United We Dream. Look up and see the difference between a judicial warrant that is actually signed by a federal judge and the quote unquote ICE warrant, where they are saying that they need to detain an individual. Only one that is signed by a judge is valid for them to enter your property, your house. So you want to make sure you say no, do not open the door, do not consent to that if you are if that situation applies to you. As always, if agents force their way in, do not resist. You want to voice your dissent. So you want to say, I do not consent to your entry. I do not consent to this search. I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I wish to speak to a lawyer as soon as possible. So that, we always have those rights, and that is the best way that you are going to protect yourself, is to only voice dissent and otherwise remain silent. It's also important to know that the warrants should have specific information about what they are searching for. Like, what is the purpose of the warrant? Is the purpose of the warrant to enter the home to detain a person? Is the purpose of the warrant to enter the home to search for drugs and drug paraphernalia? Make sure that you are reading that, and that you are sort of trying to determine what the purpose of it is, so that you can then document later on. Again, you can voice your dissent in the moment. Don't physically resist them or sort of try to lock them out of one particular room or something along those lines. But you want to have that understanding so that you can later have that conversation with an attorney to best represent you going forward in any future court case. Even if they have a warrant, you have a right to remain silent. So you can always say no, that you're not going to answer those questions. If you are being detained or arrested, it's pretty much the same thing. You want to, if you're being arrested, you do have to identify yourself to the police under Maryland law, and you have to provide them you have to provide them basic identifying information, which usually means your address. So when you are arrested, if you provide them that, that's all you need to tell them. Everything else can be, everything else should be, I want to remain silent. I want to speak to an attorney. I'm not going to answer your questions until I can speak to an attorney, and just keep repeating that over and over and over again. If you are arrested and you are taken to booking, if you are put in jail, imagine and pretty much assume that they are recording you at all times, no matter where you are in the facility. If you are making calls to someone other than your lawyer, they will be recording you. I mean, maybe not always, but you should assume that they will be. And they will be able to use that against you. So what do we not want to do when we're being detained? We don't want to resist arrest. We don't want to give them any additional information. We don't want to try to provide explanations or excuses or stories in the moment. We just want to shut up and keep our mouth shut and not tell them anything. We don't want to unlock their phone for them. That is similar to, they need a warrant to unlock your phone and access your phone unless you provide consent. If you give them consent to unlock your phone, like if they're saying, we know you didn't do this, and we just want to see, like, if you have text messages from this person, like, because you probably texted somebody you were somewhere else, Or we can look up your location on your phone. Can you just unlock it for us? Don't ever unlock your phone for them. As I mentioned, you may need to call a loved one. You may need to tell them, I've been detained, I'm arrested, I need someone to bail me out. Do not give them your excuses, your stories, your explanations of what happened over the phone. Just tell them, I've been arrested, I'm in jail, I need you to do X, Y, and Z, whether it's bail me out, whether it's take care of my cat, whether it's call my job, whether it's drop off my medications, whatever the situation may be, stick to that and don't provide them the explanations or excuses, because they can be recorded and they can be used against you in the future. Do not make any decisions about your case without talking to an attorney. So don't sign anything, don't admit to guilt, don't do anything along those lines until you've had the opportunity to talk to an attorney. Switching gears a little bit, a little bit from being arrested to now being someone who is not doing anything wrong. Maybe you weren't doing anything wrong to get arrested anyway. That certainly happens quite frequently. So we're talking about protests, which are very similar to the rights of people who are just viewing someone get arrested or, seeing that interaction with police. When you are in public, you do have the right to photograph or video anything in plain view. If you are on private property, the owner can set the rules and change that. But most interactions with police, maybe not. I don't know the numbers. So if you're on private property, like if you're in your home, you can certainly do it. If you're in like the lobby of your apartment building, there's probably no rules that prevent you from recording. But in public places, you can always record police. Police may not confiscate or demand to view your photographs or video without having a warrant, so they can't access your phone, or if you are using an old school camcorder, they can't access that memory card or VHS, depending how old school your camcorder is. But they may tell you to step back if they think that you're getting too close or interfering. They will often tell you to step back, even if you are very far away and you're not interfering at all, because they're trying to intimidate you. You do have a right to record. You can tell them, I have a right to record, but if you can record from where they are asking you to be so that they're not going to target you, it might be the right decision to make. If you cannot and you're not interfering, then it may be important to not follow their commands and to voice your legal right, but know that there is always risk involved in that. If you were stopped or detained for taking photographs or videos, always remain calm, never physically resist the officer. They cannot detain you without reasonable suspicion that you are in the process of or about to commit a crime that you have or you're in the process of. If you're stopped, always ask if you're free to go. If they say yes, then you can leave. If you are detained, then ask about what the suspected crime is, and remind the officer that you do have a First Amendment right to record them, and that recording in and of itself does not create suspicion of criminal activity. That's sort of just the general stuff for protests, and that you do have the right to do it. Stand up for yourself, but don't interfere with the lawful actions of police. This is obviously another hot topic issue that has exploded over the past year, and it's federal agents on campus, ICE specifically. What should you do? The number one thing you should do is read the email that you were probably sent on February 25th, 2025 from the Office of General Counsel. This guidance that we are telling you is everything that is from them to what you should do if ICE shows up on campus or a different federal agency. The UMD guidance is that you should not interfere with or obstruct the actions of the agents. But you should also not invite them to enter, and you should not consent to them entering any non-public areas of the university. You shouldn't disclose any personal information or sensitive information about any students. So you shouldn't provide any names or addresses or immigration status of any students or employees at the university. What you should always do is contact UMPD and contact OGC. And so if they're attempting to enter non-public areas, you should say, I cannot provide consent to you. I will not provide consent to you. I will contact UMPD or OGC, the Office of General Counsel, to assist you. And you should do that. So you can call them and say, they are on campus. Here's where they are. Please come and help with the situation. They will make decisions based on university policy and take it out of your hands. So you should just focus on not providing consent to them entering non-public areas, and contact OGC and UMPD for them to be the decision makers. That's the guidance from the university. And that's what you should follow because that's what they tell us that you have to follow. That's sort of our overview of all the many different situations that it can apply to for police encounters. You can reach out to us as well as Cindy at Undergrad Legal Aid. We're both located in the same office at 3125 South Campus Dining Hall, or you can find us online at gradlegalaid.umd.edu or just legalaid.umd.edu to get more information if you have specific questions where you are seeking legal advice that you would like to get guidance for. Were there any, I kind of wasn't checking the chat, were there any questions in the chat that popped up or anything that Cindy and I can answer?
There is a question in the Q&A. And someone asks, are we supposed to treat UMPD campus police differently than the general police encounters you've spoken about?
Answer that. The answer is no. So our advice applies to all law enforcement officers on campus, off campus. UMPD does work closely with Prince George's County Police, and sometimes there's concurrent jurisdiction, meaning you might even see a Prince George's County police officer on campus or vice versa. So all the rules that we've talked about apply to each law enforcement unit. I will say one thing that could differ with UMPD is that you are more likely to be referred to student conduct if you have had contact with a UMPD police officer, because let's say you're caught stealing a scooter on campus and UMPD cites you with theft. Not only are you going to have to go to court for that charge, but they're likely to send that citation to the Office of Student Conduct, and you're also going to have to go through the conduct process. That's less likely to happen, not completely impossible, but less likely to happen with our county police officers.
Okay, thank you, Cindy.
And I was just going to add one more resource, and I can put it in the chat. This is kind of my favorite current resource on, oh, I don't think it can go to everyone in the chat. Where should I put that, Debbie?
It will go to everyone in the chat. You can put it in there.
Oh, I only see direct message options. Okay, hold on.
Okay, or you could just send it to me and
the-
I will share it in the post-workshop email.
Yeah, you
Okay. It went to you, I can see. And I'll send it to
Got it.
Zach, or one of you could repost it if you're able to post to everyone in the chat. But it is a great resource from the ACLU on the protesters' rights, and it takes it from different perspectives. What do I do if I'm organizing the protest versus just attending the protest? What if I want to take video of the protest? What if I want to post said video on social media? So that's a really good resource depending on what your involvement is in the protest.
Okay, looks good. I shared that with everyone.
Yep, that's a great resource. And ACLU has even other resources. I will tell you that the first place I looked when I made my PowerPoints was the ACLU website because they have a great overview of interactions with police on all levels. So yes, thank you for sharing that, Cindy.
Sure thing.
I have a question that was submitted by a student outside of this workshop. Could you both talk about when and how to file a police report? And maybe cover a few different situations when that might or might not be appropriate?
Sure. So I had a student walk in just last week, and they had lost a flash drive on campus. and were very worried about identity theft and what could be done with the information that was on that flash drive because it contained some identification documents. And so I told them to leave my office and walk right down to Pocomoke, which is where our UMPD department is, and file a police report in person. Or there is, if you just Google UMPD non-emergency number, you can do that over the phone. They'll typically send someone out to meet with you or ask you to come in person anyway, so it can be done. And then not many people know this. It's sort of tangentially related. For lost and found items like that, scooters, flash drives, books, whatever, phones, laptops, if they are turned in to anyone on campus, UMPD has a centralized lost and found, and you can actually search their inventory to see if your item has been turned into them. It doesn't give every detail about the item, otherwise everybody would claim it, but there's enough information that you can submit an inquiry to see if that item is yours. But so identity theft is certainly the kind of thing that you want to file a police report for. Any missing property, obviously. And UMPD, I think they still have this. You can also register property with the police department, right? So you have to register like your scooters, your bikes, that kind of thing, because those have to be permitted. But there's also a process to register your electronics and other property so that when you go to file a police report, it's already in their inventory and you can say that's what was stolen from me. You can also file a police report with any law enforcement agency, but typically if it relates to your student status at the university, the easiest way is to go through UMPD.
Okay.
I think we lost
So
some.
if you have a complaint about your noisy neighbors and you're unable to study, how do you handle that?
They're not going to take a police report on that, right? So they're going to send you to your, let's say it's your dorm mate. They're going to send you to your RA or to Res Life to make that complaint so that hopefully it can be worked out through the RA mediation process. However, if your roommate is potentially committing acts of aggression, threatening you, there's been a physical altercation, anything that places you in danger, it's not just annoyance, because the police are not going to take up their time dealing with that level of incident. But if there's danger or you feel threatened, you can file a police report. They may also refer you down to the Hyattsville District Court, where you can file for a peace or a protective order. And if they do recommend that, you can come to our offices and we will help you with that to know what to file and how to file that. But for general annoyance kinds of things, they're going to say that's not appropriate for a police report.
Got it. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Are there any other questions? Just put them in the Q&A. All right. It's very quiet. Zach
Because
and
we
Cindy.
answered all the questions.
Yeah, I think you've covered it all. That was a terrific presentation, so comprehensive. Thank you so much, Zach, and thank you, Cindy, for the additional information. It's good for us to spend some time together, and thank you to everyone that joined in today. We've got our last workshop of the semester next Tuesday. Again, we're meeting on Zoom with Patricia Minicon. She is an immigration attorney that our offices have contracted with, and she will give us an update on immigration and what she sees coming down the road. So, important workshop for international students. So again, look for our email tomorrow with resources from this workshop. And, remember to reach out when you need help. If for some reason we can't help you, we'll refer you to someone who can. So thanks for
Debbie,
your time. Go ahead. Yes.
I saw Felix raise a hand, and I don't know if he was saying goodbye or had a question.
All right.
Felix, did you have a question? Okay, maybe he was just
Okay.
waving goodbye.
Well, thanks for coming, Felix. Thanks to everyone. Thank you, Zach and Cindy, and have a good week, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.